We're playing a massive experiment right now with humanity. With every project that we do, we ask ourselves the question, is this improving our planet?
Why do you think people don't care about it?
Since the 1950s, we've lost 73% of all wildlife. Creators, we have a massive responsibility because we have an audience. I'm just one person. What can I do? If everyone thinks like that, nothing will ever change.
And people just not listening.
We're at the cliff edge of a very scary moment. The reality is that we're at a risk.
Where do we find the hope?
A great idea that's floating around right now is that we should...
Welcome to the Mood Podcast, uncovering the art of conversation through the lens of photography and creativity, one frame at a time. I'm your host, Matt Jacob. Thanks so much for joining me in today's conversation. And my guest today is Jorik Dozy, a visionary filmmaker and film director whose groundbreaking work blends artistry and purpose. As the co-founder of Studio Birthplace, Jorik creates powerful narratives that really raise awareness about pressing environmental and social issues, using the medium of film to inspire change and provoke thought. Known for his immersive, visually stunning storytelling, Jorik has collaborated with global brands and organizations to produce content that really leaves a lasting impact. We hope, at least. In today's episode, we dive into Jorik's creative process, the philosophy behind Studio Birthplace, and the role of filmmaking in tackling global challenges. I do want to warn you, though, this conversation is a heavy one. It's upsetting, deeply emotional, and thought-provoking. A few times during recording, we did have to stop to gather ourselves as we discussed the devastating realities of the seemingly insurmountable challenges we face with nature and the world around us, from climate change to animal cruelty, and the responsibilities we all bear in addressing these pressing issues. There were moments when Jorik's passion and vulnerability moved us both to tears, underscoring the real gravity of the challenges that we face. Coupled with the ever-changing and ever-politicized world around us, we found solace in the beauty of his work and hope through those that are making real changes. So this episode is deep and it is heavy, but it's not without hope. It's a powerful reminder that standing up, educating ourselves, and making even the smallest changes in our lives can have quite a meaningful impact. So if you're listening, chances are you have the ability to do something, however small, to contribute to a better future for yourself, future generations, and all of those suffering around the world today. And for creatives, Jorik demonstrates how we can channel our artistry into work that is not only beautiful, but also profoundly purposeful. This episode was tough to record. It was both sobering and inspiring, but I really do hope it moves you as much as it moved me, just to be better, even just by 1% every day. Here is Jorik Dozy. Jorik Dozy, welcome to the Moon Podcast.
Awesome to be here.
This was a bit of a last minute thing, so I really appreciate you coming to join me. I wanted to start with kind of more of the general overview of what you do and why you do it. So just go ahead and kind of describe to us exactly what you do, but more importantly, the reasons behind what you do.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me. And I'm the co-founder of a studio called Studio Birthplace. And Studio Birthplace is a creative studio and a film production company that solely focuses on pro-planet projects. That means that we advocate, we amplify eco-conscious messages, and also especially create awareness around the planetary crisis that we're in. So we're doing a lot of work around biodiversity loss, deforestation, pollution, the climate change. And that's really like the sole focus of the studio. So there's no really hidden agenda behind it. We don't do any commercial jobs on the side to kind of pay the bills or make it work. We've really kind of planted that flag. And as far as I know, we're kind of the first ones who are really took such a stand in this as a mission. And we like to say that the studio is kind of a birthplace of new ideas, new way of thinking. It's also the work that we do talks about our collective birthplace, our planet Earth. So that's a little bit of why the studio is named after Mother Earth, essentially. And with every project that we do, we ask ourselves the question: is this improving our planet? Like, does this project, once it's made, once it's out into the world, does it have a net positive effect on our world? And that means that we say no a lot. So we do a lot of vetting on potential clients that come in on projects, to make sure that we're making the right type of work and we're sending the right type of message out into the world. Um, and I myself, I'm a creative director at the company, at the studio. I direct, I write for that, and yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell what Studio Birthplace does.
Was a nutshell that we're going to take apart and really kind of look at in intricate detail certain parts of that. And I, you talked about the crisis that we're in today. You know, that word crisis. Can you explain your reasoning behind that? Whether that's driven by science, by data, or is it more anecdotal and experiential?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely driven by what we know. I think the science on the planetary crisis is actually very good at the moment. We understand a lot about what's going on, where we're headed, and the journey of the studio is really that once we started to learn about where we're at as a species and as a humanity, with this train where we're all kind of in, it really came. This mission came to the forefront, and that's where the studio started from. So me and Sil, my co-founder, we were actually both in the entertainment industry before this. And once we started to educate ourselves and started to really realize where we're heading, that's when this idea of we want to use our skills, our talent, for positive change and to contribute to creating a better world, so to speak. And that's where the studio came from. And it's all from really learning and understanding the data and the science behind it. I think it's very powerful. Like, once you know, you can't unknow that. You have to kind of start seeing the world through that light. And that means you have to probably change things. Yeah.
And how has that change gone for you since the inception of the studio and the creative team that you put together and all the projects? You know, my first kind of like high level question would be like, are you making positive change in the world, or do you feel that you are?
Yeah. I hope so. I think there's a lot to unpack here, actually, because I've seen there are projects. For example, one of the projects, maybe we can dive into that one a bit deeper later. It's called Wastminster, that we did for Greenpeace, and we actually managed to change the law. So that was a project where we had a very direct and clear impact. It was very, you could point at, tangible, exactly, very tangible. But besides that, of course, you can influence a lot of people just by changing the way they think and changing the way on how they see something or see the world or a specific issue. And that is just in general awareness creation, which is what most of our projects are doing. And then a lot of times we're also trying to connect these projects with a very specific call to action to have that tangible change. Um, I think the entertainment industry and advertising, social media, etc., creators, we have a massive responsibility because we have an audience, and the entertainment industry determines what's cool. We determine what people want to buy. We determine really the path of culture to a large extent, right? The films we watch, the series we watch, the celebrities that we look up to for some reason. People are shaping their way of thinking a lot by the culture that we live in and the entertainment that we see. So, and the advertising industry, I mean, we know, right, has played a huge part in creating this endless consumer behavior that we're
mostly
stuck
nefarious part.
Exactly. So we have a massive responsibility collectively as the creative industry to turn this around and to change the conversation and to start talking about like things that are really important and that can help this transition. Yeah.
Interesting that you feel like it's the creative industry that has that responsibility. I mean, and you use the word for one of the first ones to do it. In other words, in my eyes, I don't see anyone else doing what you're doing right now, which is both scary, I'm sure, for you, but in a pioneering aspect, hugely inspirational. Just joining the kind of the creative world with the global environmental and sustainable world. Where does politics fit into that? Because we know that a lot of this stuff is politicized, or a lot of this stuff is taken advantage of to make money, whether it's the advertising world or the social media platforms or the governments or local regulations. How do you balance this kind of real delicate environment when it comes to dealing with these huge topical projects?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is also a constant learning curve for us, and the landscape is always shifting. Um, I think like the entertainment industry has a massive responsibility to bring this message to the world and to change the way that we consume and that we think. But of course, the political side, that's where the real change can be made. We need policy change. We need to shift, the kind of laws and the kind of things that our leaders are agreeing to do, um, and we need to hold them accountable. So a big part of our work is to try and find a way to bridge the communications gap between the science, the policymakers, and the public, because there's a massive um, gap there in understanding of our situation. The scientists are talking in a language that the public doesn't fully understand, and the policymakers are not held accountable by the public, because the public doesn't fully understand it. And the policymakers are usually not even in the room as the scientists are explaining what is happening in the world. So they're not really listening, and we're not holding them accountable. So that is what we are trying to kind of come in and say, we're going to create these projects that are very entertaining, that are very highly appealing. We use a lot of really high concept and high production value to appeal to that general public, and then sneak in these messages of the scientists and of the state of the world, so that the people can start to better understand the situation that we're in. But of course, our goal is to really get to the policymakers. So we're trying to find ways, actually actively this year especially, we're trying to find ways to make work that really talks to the policymakers as well, because that's in the end where we need to make changes.
Yeah, it's almost difficult to have the conversation without being cynical, skeptical, and almost nihilistic in the hope to get to the policymakers. And then what? We know that it's not an easy conversation to have with the policymakers, and things that news kind of topics that just come out, such as a few days ago from recording, the 1.5 degree over 1.5 degree increase in global temperatures since the Industrial Revolution, which is way sooner than anyone ever expected.
Correct.
That's a really good example of no one really listening at the top, no one really listening really at the middle. What do you say to those people that think that that kind of rhetoric is scaremongering, is just wrong, it's wrong data, it's wrong science, it's conspiracies, it's politicized to change a certain power hierarchy or a certain political movement?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good topic, because and maybe here we can unpack the 1.5 a little bit.
Let's do it.
Because again, it's not clear communicated to the world, like what this really means. And even we hear the scientists now say, like, it's no longer enough to do science for science. Like, we need to do science for the public now.
Yeah.
Because we're misunderstanding our situation. So the reality is that we're at a risk of destabilizing the livability, the way that our Earth can actually sustain what we're doing to it. So we're at the cliff edge of a very scary moment. And the 1.5 degrees, what that we've crossed it. So last year was the first year in history, right, since modern recording began, is that we've crossed we've been above 1.5 degree of average increase for an entire year. This does not mean, however, that the global average is 1.5, because that's measured over 5 to 30 year period. So we're actually, when they talk about the 1.5 degree Paris Agreement goal, we haven't crossed that yet, because we're around 1.2 to 1.3 degrees when you look at it long term. So the IPCC, who the United Nations climate change panel, they will kind of look at it over a 5-year to a 30-year period, and then say, okay, this is the global average over that period, and that is the world we're living in. Because a 1-year average can be kind of an anomaly.
Skewed, yeah.
How do you say?
Anomaly.
Anomaly. That's the word.
An anomaly.
Yeah. So we're still aiming for that 1.5. And do you actually know why the 1.5? Because this is also.
No, I don't. I mean, I would guess from what I've read and heard that it's almost an irreversible limit. Essentially, we can't really recover from that.
Yeah. You're well informed, actually. So 1.5 is where science has kind of determined that there are irreversible tipping points. And some of those tipping points, honestly, we could be there already. That's still, we have to see how things go. But at 1.5, we're talking about losing all of the coral reefs, the tropical coral reefs in our world. We're talking about not being able to stop the melting of the Arctic ice, the Greenland ice sheet, the Western Arctic ice sheet, which combined is like 10 meters of sea level rise or something. So 1.5 is kind of that critical point where we're saying, the science is saying we should not cross that. Is that, the debate of like, if we're going to cross that or not, I mean, yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Like, who knows? But it's scary. And I think attached to this is that what people don't realize and what they don't know is that we're playing like a massive experiment right now with humanity. The world has never been this warm before since we've been around. So for the last 12,000 years, since we invented farming and then the Industrial Revolution happened, we've lived in this like corridor of life, this kind of Garden of Eden of humanity, where the climate was extremely stable enough for us to invent farming and depend on rainfall, depend on seasons being accurate. That wasn't always the case. That's been only roughly for 12,000 to 15,000 years. That has allowed humanity to flourish and to become what we are today. Before that, 200,000 years of human in our modern form roaming the world, we were hunter-gatherers reacting to ice ages, reacting to a very unstable climate. And even in that period, the Earth's temperature never really reached, I think it's something like near 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees. So we are, the latest UNEP report, the United Nations Environmental Program, has estimated that we're heading towards 3.1 by the end of the century. We have never lived in a world like that. So there's no science that says that we can sustain modern society in a world like that.
Happy January, everyone.
Yeah, it's a bit depressing.
But this is exactly the problem. My next question was really, you must know the film Don't Look Up. I thought it was just as you're talking and reminding me of that film and how well it was and how subtly it was written, so many kind of sub-layers of different stories, but the overarching story is why, people just not listening, right? People not listening to the data, the scientists, the people that we know. And there's for me, there's a lot that goes into that. COVID was another kind of perfect analogy to this environment where people don't trust the experts. They don't recognize experts anymore. They don't trust institutions because of many reasons, social media being a huge one, disparate politics, many, many things. But there is this huge issue that the general public don't care or don't want to listen, can't really, we're obviously generalizing. Why is that?
Yeah. this drives me crazy also because if the information I just told you was publicly known, we would all change our life right away because it means that your child. It's important to realize that people who have a child today, their child will be not living in a world that looks like this, right? They will be 60, 70 years old in a very different world. And I think that once you know that, um, you I don't know how can you still do what we're doing. So it's very frustrating that this is not fully explained in a good way. And I think it's also because people cannot. There's this thing with humans that we cannot empathize with our future selves. We cannot feel empathy for us in 10 or 20 years. Like there's something that
Yeah.
holds us back from that. We're all about short-term survival, right? Our instincts from our caveman days have taught us that, right? Like we need to survive now, we need to do this now, and there's no long-term thinking. And that is, I think, what's holding us back to a large extent, that people cannot make decisions for the long road. And there's so many beautiful quotes about planting a tree that your children will sit under. That way of thinking is what we need. We need to start thinking long term, and we need to have, like we like to say it now, is like a revolution of kindness. We need to wake up, um, and have empathy towards each other.
Yeah, I kind of battle with take animal cruelty for example.
Yeah,
I I don't I just try really hard to empathize with, various countries have different, cultural practices, and they
yeah,
kind of wash themselves of any kind of harm because of they hide behind that. But it's analogous to these types of environmental issues because I can't grapple with any understanding of it. Like I just don't understand why anyone would be cruel to an animal. I just don't. I do understand why people eat meat. I eat meat sometimes and fish and stuff, as long as it's treated humanely in the killing process. And
yeah,
I can kind of get okay with that. Um, and I don't want to we'll talk about animals a little bit. I mean, your project with birds was, brought me to tears because it it sheds light on these issues that clearly the majority of the people don't care about, and I still don't know why. Because I don't have children, but if I did have children, I mean, I care about it even without children and not even thinking about the next generation. I want to live in a world where we're not getting more typhoons every year, more wildfires every year, but everyone suffers, right?
yeah,
So I don't understand why everyone wouldn't do their little part
yeah,
to help change. But at the end of the day, it does come down to the people at the top. And it's just like such a difficult maze to navigate, right?
yeah.
And I put this question to you again. Why do you think people don't care about it? Or is it just ignorance and they're kind of like comfortable with that ignorance?
Well, one of the things that we're trying to apply a lot in the work we do is that we have to make people relate to these issues. It's one thing about knowing it. It's another thing that you fully feel it, or you understand it. And I think that's a big part here that we're trying to do with the studio, is that we're creating films that and campaigns where we make a massive issue or something that we want to raise awareness on, and we try to make it human. We try to make it emotional. We try to make it funny or accessible in a way that you suddenly relate to it as a human. And that can change you in a different way, because everyone is so tired of the news being constantly, doom scenarios, this and the story I just told you. Like, I think people will switch off if that is on the news every day, right? I mean, in a way it is, right? Climate change and all the disasters that are happening, and people don't seem to really understand that we have to change the way we live. Um, so we have to humanize it. We have to make it relatable for people so they can engage with it emotionally. They can they can feel it with their heart, and then that has more chance to affect change than if you just bombard someone with information. And that's really like what we do at the studio. We try to engage people through a humor, or we try to tell like a really beautiful story in a way that makes you relate to it as a parent or as a family member. So I think these are the type of methods that we're trying to engage. Yeah.
There's something in the human psyche about proximity to an issue, right? It's
100%. Yeah.
Why I don't care as much about children with AIDS in Africa or children with malaria in Africa as I do about a dog on the street where I live, right? It's not as close. It's not as close to us. So it's almost like, and you talk about communication a lot, which is clearly a huge part of the problem. Getting actually in front and, like you said, humanizing, making it relatable to these people so that I can actually see this is on your doorstep. This is not the other side of the world. You are suffering or will suffer if we don't, you directly will suffer if we don't do something about that. But also put it in a way that isn't preachy, that isn't dictatorial, right?
Yeah. I think that's really important. We don't want to blame and shame. That's not really what this is. We need a movement of inclusivity. We need to, everyone needs to feel part of creating this change. And everyone is. Everyone should be. So I think that's the beautiful thing about it. And talking about animals and talking about something not on your doorstep, like since the 1950s, we've lost 73% of all wildlife. It's all right. It's okay, man. It's okay. I'm with you. Yeah. Take your time. Yeah, and then you do a project like Broken Wings and add one of my favorite pianists to the. Yeah.
I mean, just wonderful. What a wonderful film, and that brought me to tears because just something about animal enslavement, almost capturing animals, killing them for fun, keeping them confined for fucking no reason other than someone's status.
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be, right? Something it breaks my heart all the time. And we try and do our little part. That's why we've got 4.5 dogs. At our home.
4.5.
Well, we have a stray
That's the story.
We have a stray dog who we haven't quite homed, but he comes and says hello every day. And yeah. We've yeah.
I'm with you, man. It's hard. Like, I think like just saying that kind of brought up like the reality of, like, but yeah, maybe we just slightly changed it for a bit. So yeah.
Tell me about how you make these projects, from a technical aspect, but also from a conceptual aspect. Your team have worked, I mean, we haven't even touched upon that yet. How amazing your team is. You obviously at kind of the forefront alongside your co-founders and other directors, but this team that you've put together have worked on anything from blockbusters to intimate projects that have so much depth and meaning to them. Tell me how this all came about, where you started with this, what your process is like, how the team really evolved with these types of projects.
Yeah, it's an interesting path really that we were on, because so both me and Sil, my co-founder, we come from Hollywood, really. Like that's where our journey started. So I was working in visual effects for 10 years at Industrial Light and Magic, which is George Lucas's company, the guy who made Star Wars, working on the biggest films in the world. So I was on set for like the Transformers movies, and I was working on Mission Impossible, Pirates of the Caribbean, like those type of films.
Shit films.
Entertainment.
Incredible.
Popcorn.
No,
entertainment.
I love them. I was being sarcastic. Just small films like Mission Impossible, Pirates of the Caribbean. Yeah.
They're a blast because, it's really amazing to see the craft, and the people that make these films, and to be part of that. It's a privilege, and it brings together. Like I worked on the new Star Wars trilogy, and there's really like the best people in the world that are in those respective jobs come together to make a film like that, and that's just awesome to see that. And it really trained my eye. Like for me, it was kind of my film school. Like I never went to film school, so this was where I learned about craft and good composition and lighting, especially, and how to make an appealing image. And now with the studio, we are taking that way of thinking. So we're taking the spectacle, so to speak, of those type of films, and we're applying them into the eco space. So we're taking visual effects, high concept as well, thinking out of the box in terms of ideas, and bringing them into the green sector and the eco storytelling space, where that really hasn't been done a lot. Like, we don't really see a lot of projects that have that way of thinking or that kind of production value. And that's how we, I think, separate ourselves from a lot of other work done in the sector. So we're really trying to be that super high production value place. Yeah. And I think the team that we have, there's a naivety to what we do, because a lot of the topics that we work on are very difficult to talk about or explain, or even to film practically. But we always go in with so much drive and excitement that we're like, yeah, we'll figure it out. When really, if you present a project like that to a seasoned uh, advertising person, they would be like, let's change the idea. But we just kind of have that drive to say, let's figure it out. And that's how we end up, following an actual bird poacher and combining that with incredible cinematic camera work. And that's how we end up filming an entire film underwater and build a life-size replica of a whale made entirely of trash to talk about plastic pollution. All of these ideas kind of come from combining that spectacle and creativity, different way of approaching a subject, and the real fact, the real documentary aspect of it. I think that's quite unique. Yeah.
Very unique, and a way to, I guess, get people's attention in a shocking way, right? Oh wow, this is something different, but there's still a story underneath there that's been either told before or no one's aware of, right? How do you fund all this?
It's different on every project, to be honest. Like, one of the clients we work with a lot is Greenpeace, for example. We've done like 5 global campaigns with them, and they have their kind of communication budget. We work with organizations like Discovery Channel, a lot of NGOs where we try to find partnerships with brands. So we try to work with brands who fit our ethos, and we're really putting their money where their mouth is, and trying to change the way they produce products or the way that they do things. And also one thing that we've been doing quite a bit is working with musicians, where we make music videos for a specific artist, and the music video doesn't feature the artist, but it features one of the messages, one of the topics that we want to shed light on. And then the label would fund that, for example. But that is a very effective method as well to raise awareness, because when you work with an artist, you have an audience already, and that audience loves this artist, so they will watch it, and they will go into watching that film or video, um, listening to their favorite music, and suddenly their whole eyes are opened with this other message that you're presenting to them that otherwise they probably would have never sat down for. So that is a method that we really enjoy, and we do it quite a bit. Yeah.
Is that how, I'm sorry to kind of go back to the animal thing, but the Broken Wings project was really took my interest, just because, first of all, I was like, how did they do this? You're constantly balancing aesthetics with ethics,
Yeah.
almost, right? And this tightrope walk of following a poacher, poaching birds in real life, real person who does that. How do you go about like explaining what you're doing to him, and maybe at least getting him to understand that you're not taking advantage of such a kind of nefarious activity? How do you even approach those with the subjects and the people that you're kind of prioritizing those projects?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have a relationship with the people that you're working with, of course, and for them to feel comfortable with you, and you explain what you're doing. In this case, with the poacher, um, we really talked to him about kind of capturing the traditional way of how he goes about it. So we saw the bamboo tube, and they put glue on branches to um, capture the birds, and that's something that that's very specific to. This is a very specific method. So that was kind of what we were focusing on. We never showed his face in the film. We kind of kept his identity blank, because the second part of it is that he is just a husband taking care of his family. He's not a bad person. He's just doing this because he doesn't have any other options. So it's never, again, about blaming and shaming. It's not putting the camera in his face and saying, you're a bad person. It's about showing the fact that this is happening, showing the reality of this, but then also showing the other side that he's just surviving with his family. In the end, we're all captives in this capitalist system. So we're just all caught in this system.
So then is some of your responsibility to try and educate him, or you step away from that?
I don't know if it's my responsibility to educate him, but it's what I hope to do as a person. But sometimes people are also stuck. And then if you can educate them all you want, but if they don't have a way out, if they don't have an alternative, that falls on deaf ears, because they might actually understand what they're doing is not completely right, but doesn't mean that they have an alternative. So actually the solution there would be to work with government, work with NGOs to find alternative for these situations. And that type of work is being done everywhere, right? Like a lot of people are trying to change these exploitative industries, and especially wildlife poaching. There's a lot of work trying to be done to try and change that, but it's really hard when you're stuck in the kind of system and the situation that these people are, that they find themselves in. Yeah.
Not just poaching. I mean, what goes into that as well? There's deforestation, right? I mean, the statistics behind that right now are.
Yeah. Yeah. The deforestation is actually, like, if we want to stop, if we want to make sure we don't go above 1.5, one of the most important things is that we have to stop destroying nature. It's actually nature. We have to start seeing it as like the massive ally that it is. We have to stop destroying it. We have to restore it. We have to regenerate it. Even if we stop emitting fossil fuels tomorrow, there's already so much in the atmosphere that we will still cross 1.5 if we don't stop destroying nature. So nature is actually this massive carbon sink, right? Where a lot of the pollution that we put out onto the planet is being absorbed by our natural systems. So the ocean, the atmosphere, and land is absorbing a massive amount of the pollution, right, that we put out into our Earth systems. And without healthy ecosystems, this carbon cannot be absorbed. So we're actually, by destroying nature, we're actually kind of shooting ourselves in the foot in trying to stop this planetary crisis. And I'll go a little bit more like sciencey here, but the really alarming thing that we're seeing right now, and scientists don't fully understand it yet, is that actually when you look at the amount of carbon that all of our Earth systems are absorbing, it's flatlining. So what that's kind of showing is that the ability for planet Earth to respond to what we're doing to it is starting to break. Like maybe it says that the Earth is no longer able to absorb so much of our heat and our carbon, and it's kind of at its limit. So that means that nature really is no longer an ally as it was. It's no longer helping us with diminishing the effects of what we're doing to it. So that's very alarming also.
Does this come down to money most of the time? Greed?
I mean, it all comes down to that, man. I think power and greed that is it. That is it. Like, science can shout all they want. We can come with all the solutions, but what is the solution to greed? What is the solution to capitalism? Like, we need to completely change the way we think. And that is what scientists cannot do. That is where people, like us and like I talked about before, the entertainment industry, everyone can be part of that and has to be part of that, right? We really need to change the way that we look at the planet and nature. Nature is our mother. Like, that's how we need to see it. And you would never harm or pollute your mother. So once you change that way of thinking, we need that kind of thinking in society. Yeah.
There's almost a feeling of resignation as well, though. Like, I'm just one person. I can't make a difference.
Yeah.
So how do we go about kind of collectively coming together in such a polarized world to have kind of the same message, and at least to drive, because change of the public institutions, change of governments, change of greed, which we've got to stay hopeful in that we can at least impact that, can come from the majority, can come from the us people on the ground just going about our daily lives. But certainly in my experience in the 40 or so years that I've lived, there's definitely just a feeling of, well, I try my best, but really it's up to the people with the power.
Yeah.
How do we combat that?
Yeah. I mean, this is exactly the point, right? Of how um, I'm just one person. What can I do? It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. If everyone thinks like that, nothing will ever change. And we don't actually need that many people to change in order to create a revolution, right? The history shows us that you don't really need the majority. You need a big enough group. Um, I think that's really an important thing to understand. But also, the we need to hold our leaders accountable. We're in a point now where, let's say, I'm going to tell you now this list of solutions you can do as an individual, like switch off your light bulb. These things, they're important. Don't get me wrong. We need to do that collectively, but
These are solar powered lights, by the way.
this is a fully green studio. But it's more important to start holding our leaders accountable and collectively start rising up against this destructive system that we have created. Because in the end, it's just a concept, right? Like, capitalism is just an idea that we came up with now that we're seeing as our truth. But that doesn't have to be the truth. And there's many like indigenous ways, and there's many different kind of ways of thinking that still exist on this planet that show us that we can have different systems, that we can have a different mindset. And we should start looking at those, and we should start listening to them. And I think as an individual, you can start to make that change within you. And when you do, you can affect people around you. And it can come from it can start there. Because there's a lot of there's a lot of practical solutions and physical things you can do. Like, for example, not having kids is actually one of the biggest thing you can do as to reduce your impact, or just less. Like, we don't need 4 or 5 children. That's an individual thing you can do. You can not fly, for example. You can adopt a plant-based diet or reduce your meat intake. Those 3 things alone are like the biggest things you can do as an individual. But beyond that, it's about here.
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree. But then you have, let's take the kids thing. I do feel, and maybe you can back this up based on what you said with some data, but the world is overpopulated, which means we have to expand, but into the landscapes, into nature, and just expand. Where does it end? We're growing exponentially, essentially, as a global population, as science gets better to keep us living longer, and people are still having just a stupid amount of kids. But you look at the countries that are really kind of new in that aspect and developing. Take India, for example, one of the biggest polluters, one of the biggest breeders, right? Where that's what I mean, like in terms of regulation. Well, if India aren't going to do anything about it, then what? I'm not going to make a difference.
Yeah.
But if at least the rest of us can all kind of do our tiny little part and come together doing our tiny little part, then that's enough for change.
Yeah. And I think also it's a great example what you mentioned, because that is true. That's all true. And that's also a reason why people say, well, look at them, But it's not about that, man. It's like, look at us.
Yeah.
But
it gets politicized.
But I think important to understand is that India, like the average emissions, the average pollution, and a citizen in India causes versus what someone in the West causes, or in Japan, or in a richer country, it's significantly higher. So our responsibility is higher, and we need to make sure that we develop the technologies, and we help the developing countries to not make the same mistakes that the richer countries have made, because we have that responsibility collectively. A great idea that's floating around right now is that we should treat some of these tipping points that we talked about earlier, where actually, so we have these systems on our planet that really regulate the biosphere. They really regulate like the livability of the planet. And an idea that's, for example, the Amazon rainforest is one of them, right?
Coral reefs.
Yeah. And the idea is to make these kind of systems global commons so that they belong to the citizens of the planet. And if we do that, then we give poorer countries the ownership of something that now we're saying, hey, you're going to get paid by, the world to keep this rainforest intact. And you're going to get money from that, and you can, spend that on developing your economy and whatever. But you're not going to destroy this rainforest. Like, these type of ideas are great, but the richer countries need to start implementing them and agreeing to those.
And there are many examples of that on a local level. You take Raja Ampat in Indonesia and Misul, a biodiverse reef essentially that is protected, not completely. They allow scuba divers and liveaboards to go in, but they pay a fucking premium, and that money goes to the protection of that area. And in the space of a decade, it's the most biodiverse, diving site in the world. It's incredible. The Earth is resilient. We forget. I think we rest on our laurels in that aspect. But if we give it a chance, it can come back from the brink.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful you say that, because it's so critical for us to know. And like, I'm not a scientist, so I've just been on this journey of kind of trying to learn all about this, right? Because the information is out there, right? You can kind of start to understand this if you're willing to look into it. And what's so powerful about it, once you start looking at this, is that nature is it's our biggest ally, and it's the most powerful thing that we have. We invest billions of dollars into all these other technologies, which we also need, right? Don't get me wrong. Like, we need to develop carbon capture technology and all of that. But when you talk about scaling those things and the impact that it has, preserving nature and taking care of our planet does so much more than all of those technologies. So it's so important that we start to look at our planet as part of us. Yeah.
I think it's easy for people to think that, well, technology is going to solve the Elon Musks of the world will figure out a solution, right? And that may be the case, but
exactly.
I've seen Elon on Twitter, and he ain't thinking too much about the environment.
But this mindset is very dangerous, because it's not.
Yeah.
Like, there might be a technology that will help us, right? Like solar. Take solar, for example. Like, what an incredible revolution we're on with solar energy, right? And solar and wind energy are really the important. And the only problem, again, with this, and here comes greed in the conversation, is that we're not offlining fossil fuels. So even though we are developing and we have more energy than ever before, because we have all these green energy sources as well, we're not offlining. We keep going with our fossil fuel industry as well. So we just keep getting more energy. We're not taking the pollution, the bad energy offline. Europe is setting a good example. Like, they're making good headway with it, right? Like, I think Europe is, I believe, one of the only places where our carbon emissions are not rising. But yeah, in general, when you look at the world, we create more sustainable energy, more green energy, but we're not offlining the bad stuff. And what was your question? Sometimes I just go on this ramble, guys.
About technology and thinking that might be the solution to everything.
Yes,
right?
yes. So I'll close that one off, because so we're not offlining that. And the best technology that we have is a tree. The best technology that we have is nature. It has already invented everything that we need. So we just need to keep that whole. Yeah.
There's a lot of greenwashing going on. Do you encounter a lot of that type of financial kind of undercurrent?
Yeah, there's always the risk of kind of taking on a project that ends up being a greenwash project. So that's what we're really careful with. I think people are becoming very aware of the term greenwashing and what it is. So that's good. But it's scary, like, how much it's the word sustainability has lost its meaning.
Yeah.
Everything is sustainable nowadays, but it's not. For something to truly be sustainable, is very hard.
So define. Let's dive into that just for people who may be confused or not know about the real definitions of. Just talk about greenwashing, really what that means, and sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, greenwashing is just saying you're doing something great, and we're being sustainable, and we're investing this much money into this, and you're covering up the fact that behind the scenes you're actually continuing as usual, or you're still polluting, or you're not really doing what you're saying you're doing. So essentially, it's just kind of putting up a picture to the public, but it's not very truthful.
Marketing.
Yeah, it's a marketing trick.
Or PR, yeah.
And this is, we fight this quite a lot with Studio Birthplace. We did a campaign with Greenpeace against greenwashing. Another interesting one is sports washing, which is what we did a project on, where a fossil fuel company is sponsoring a huge sporting event to say, look at us, we're awesome. Like, we're sponsoring your World Cup, we're sponsoring your whatever event. We're the good guys. But it's all about the association, right? So they're associating themselves with something that we in our culture think is awesome, and therefore they must be awesome. That's a form of greenwashing. Yeah. And this is happening everywhere. And once you start to be aware of this, it's everywhere.
Yeah. Actually, this is not the same example, but I was watching NFL playoffs yesterday morning, and I said to Fee, my wife, who's watching it with or working alongside me, and this very athletic game, right? Super healthy. These athletes are incredible human specimens. And obviously it's American TV. So every 2 minutes there's commercials, and almost all of the commercials are, I remember thinking some amazing play happened, and it's just such a wonderful example of a human at his highest potential. And then it cut to a break, and it was an advert for McDonald's. And it's just like, that's nothing to do with, well, it is to do with the NFL. They take money to put adverts on TV. It's like, why are we not promoting? I know that's off topic, but it's analogous to kind of taking money and running so that we can kind of pretend to be good, or to pretend to carbon offsetting, or whatever it might be, to kind of essentially just get money in the door.
Yeah.
Right? It
comes back to capitalism, right? And greed. It's all about profit, profit, profit. We treat the planet like it's infinite. Our whole economic system is built on infinite growth. Profit, profit, profit. But that's not how the planet works. The planet is circular. So the system does not work on a circular planet. And we're seeing the results of it now. We're getting the bill. We're getting the first few receipts.
Anything expensive.
Exactly. Of the last few years have been the most expensive when it comes to how much money we need to pay to rebuild from climate disasters. So we're getting the bill.
We haven't really talked about filmmaking that much, but I encourage anyone watching and listening to this to go and obviously watch your show reel. The show reel itself is like, how do you put this together? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a filmmaker, but I'm aghast at just how technically and well produced these things are. Obviously, with a team in the background that you have, multiple awards and recognitions that you have, which we haven't even touched upon, about the good you're doing in just the awareness space, which I imagine is really what these awards mean, in terms of, right, a little pat on the back, but at least people are seeing this type of content and these types of films and these moving narratives. Let's just touch upon the technical aspect of putting the show reel together. For example, there's some AI in there, there's some animations, there's some real life footage. I mean, I don't know. Break that down for me, and kind of what techniques are you using on a creative basis?
Interesting you say that. There's no AI in
there. There's no AI?
No.
That blows my mind. Right. So now you have to tell me how you do it. Really?
Yeah. Which part were you
all of it?
Really?
That just means it's well conceived.
No, we try not to use AI for our final products or anything. It's all craft. It's all visual effects, like the kind of otherworldly things that you see in there, and a lot of it is real as well. So I think all of what we discussed about finding an original visual, or something that's very appealing and grabs you as an audience, they come with different challenges and techniques. So usually it starts from the place of what is what we're trying to tell here, and what is the message, the story. Of course, story is everything. That's where we start. but then what is the most original, crazy way to tell this story that you've never seen before, or that you might have never thought or felt about this topic in this way before? And that's what we start. That's what we investigate then, and we start to write and research. Research is a massive part of it. Last year we did a project called Earth Defender, which is about the people who are really defending the remaining wilderness that we have on the planet. Many of them are indigenous peoples, and we spent months researching that. Then we spent 5 weeks on the ground with the community before we shot anything. So the time it kind of costs to, and even though the video is an 8-minute piece, so it took months of research and 5 weeks on the ground, sculpting that film with the community to get it to the place where it could become what it became. And I think that process is intensive. And then after that, we have the visual effects or the post-production aspect of it as well. And that's where I think our expertise and the background that I mentioned about visual effects and working on these films comes into play, because we understand really well how we can create these images and how we can apply visual effects in an interesting way. So yeah, most of the visuals you saw are done, I guess, the traditional way of non-AI, like
Yeah,
visual effects, 3D animation,
the
and
Pirates of the Caribbean way.
exactly, and like trying to combine it with doing as much as we can on location itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that Earth Defender, I don't think I watched all of it, but I watched 4 or 5 minutes of it, and again, just there's something that you do with the story in the cinematic way, which it certainly appeals to me and gets me like getting emotional, and without just knowing much about it, just diving into the film, suddenly like bang, fuck.
You're in
Like
this world.
how do you go about that storytelling aspect? You talked about research, obviously. Where does it where does it even start? Is it team meetings and conceptual kind of drawing on whiteboards, or do you already have it in your head, or is it a bit of everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different per project, but
Okay.
um, with that film, for example, what we try to do, and the Broken Wings about bird poaching, is a similar method where we bring in um, cinematic equipment, like high end equipment with a really good crew, um, to put you like you feel like you're watching a film that you might see, on a streaming platform or on the cinema or whatever. But it is actually a real documentary piece. So we try to lens it very differently than how a traditional documentary filmmaker would portray it. And I think that way of thinking comes from that cinema background that we have, and that is not something that's done a lot. So maybe that's why the films, they're quite immersive in a lot of ways, because you almost feel like you're watching a narrative film, and not a traditional documentary.
Yeah, it's definitely a pioneering way of doing these, or at least telling these stories, right? In a very beautiful way. Because I talk about that all the time, and even with photography, if I can make something that looks nice, I've already got someone curious. And so, that's the difference with documentary. Like that, you might watch a documentary because it's a topic that appeals to you, but I'm still here. I want to see something that's nice, and therefore is going to like really appeal to me at a different level. I'm going to keep watching it because it kind of looks nice and it's making me feel really weird. And then I start kind of paying attention to the story. And in the Broken Wings case, you have one of my favorite pianists playing such a wonderful piece of music. He moves me every time I listen to him, Ludovico Einaudi. How do you go about the production side of getting in touch with someone like that, who I would consider as almost unreachable?
Yeah, with him it was a unique approach, actually, because we collaborate with this streaming platform called Waterbear. Waterbear Network. They call themselves kind of the Netflix for the planet. So they only have films on their platform that are for the planet and about the planet. And we pitched the film to them, and they actually allowed us to. They funded it, and they allowed us to produce it. And then once we had an edit, I sent it to Ludovico with his
Oh,
music under it, and his label, and I mean his management responded with like, "Let's talk." So that's how that project came together. And then we once it all kind of connected and they were on board, we actually flew to one of his concerts where he was performing, and we got a few hours with him before the show to film the opening and the ending of the film.
When he's on stage.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. So that's how that kind of came together. But it's a unique case because the film was already shot when we presented it to him, which is not, normally what happens. Yeah.
Music, I guess, is an important part of these videos.
Key.
Yeah. Is so emotive, right?
Exactly. Music is straight emotion.
Yeah.
So it's very important. And the way that Ludovico composes, there's a very like primal kind of feeling to his music. I think like this kind of he uses like very repetitive kind of rhythmic elements, and it's a perfect to depict nature with that kind of music. And a lot of people who listen to Ludovico says that he's kind of their portal into nature and into connecting with nature.
It's very natural in his natural. No, very natural.
I don't know what it
is.
It
sparks nature, right? And in that case, it was perfect because even the song sounded like birdsong, right?
Yeah,
it's even in the dark part, the darker movements and the brighter movements. So, one of many projects. We could spend hours going through all of your projects because I'm so interested in all of them. But where was, before even these projects were conceived, where was the pivotal moment for you in terms of moving from Hollywood essentially and that kind of sector of VFX and filmmaking to these more global issues and more of a kind of NGO aspect of making films?
Yeah.
Was there like a click at some point?
I think there was a bit, but it was gradual in a way that it started with this educational part that I mentioned about really understanding the situation that we're in and learning about the science. But then at the same time, while I was learning that, and I changed, I became a vegetarian. I became more aware of like my own impact as well. But then at the same time, I was still just making entertainment, right? Which is great. Like people need that. I want to come home sometimes and put on a film and just not think. Like we need that in our society as well. But I was feeling like, how can I use my time? How can I use my whatever skill that I have, whatever I've learned, for change? So that became my kind of question. And my co-founder Sil was also on that same journey. And we've been like best buddies for a long time. So we were talking about this a lot, and we started to direct projects together. And we made a project about sulfur miners, which was also a music film. Actually, it's kind of music video. That's really the foundation of where Studio Birthplace came from. It's like music videos. And we made that film, and it kind of depicts the life that sulfur miners have and how they need to go into a very, toxic place to make a living, and how it affects their bodies, and how little money they get for it. Essentially a form of modern slavery in a way, right? Like the fact that this is still happening. And sulfur is in everything. It's in our electronics, it's in our toothpaste, it's in our makeup. Like it's everywhere.
Soap.
Yeah. And we made that film, and then we fell in love with the community. They were just so beautiful. The people, we were so welcomed, and it was such an amazing experience that we set up a fundraiser. And the fundraiser, I think it collected something like $25,000 for it. And we were able to send like 100 kids to school, like fund the education of the kids, like even renovate some of the school classrooms. And that like really was like, like me pointing a camera somewhere can make like a huge impact to people's lives. And I think that project became kind of like a kickoff point for us to say we should turn this like into a studio, into our job really. And it really also came from the idea of what is activism, because activism can look very different for everyone. It looks different for everyone. You don't like. Sometimes I feel like I want to take a sign and go block a road somewhere, and demand change. But maybe that's not the best use of my skill. Maybe I can use my whatever I've learned to influence other people and to educate other people. And filmmaking is kind of my way of, giving back to everything that I've obtained and I've learned and all the privileges that I've been given, to to make that change. Yeah.
How do you balance the emotional toll of these projects? And do you? I mean, how do you even process it? Maybe not balance because it's so difficult. But when you go to these places and you do these projects and you invest so much time, energy, mental capacity, empathy, money into telling these incredible stories in the most innovative and artistic way that you do you even kind of get back? I mean, there is that thing of you leaving, right? How do you process the emotional toll that these projects have on you? Or do you?
Yeah. Um, I'm like a pretty, I would say I'm a positive person. Like I have usually, quite a lot of energy and I look at life like I'm enjoying myself, like this, it's a privilege to do what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm not someone who really kind of comes away from a project broken, but more just feeling grateful and privileged that I was able to experience that and to share the story with the world. And there are many people who are doing the work that I'm putting a camera on, who are experiencing the real intense bad stuff. And maybe I'm telling their story or I'm capturing a little bit of that, but I'm not living that, right? I can, at the end of the day, I can go home. And that I think gives me this perspective that I should just be nothing more than grateful. And I'm here to do my part and try to kind of contribute and telling these people stories or these animal stories or whatever it is that we're pointing the camera at. And it gives me a lot of kind of energy to keep going. Actually, it gives me a lot of like will to fight, so to speak, because there's stories out there that we need to know about and that we need to change. There's situations we need to change. And that kind of feeling is just deeply rooted, I think, in me to have this kind of endless kind of mission. I feel like I'm on this mission, and that kind of keeps me going. Yeah.
Do you think us as artists and creatives should have a purpose behind their work?
Ideally, I think. Um, what is if you don't have a purpose, then why are you doing it? I think sure because it's fun, but how long can you keep doing that? I think everyone has to find their purpose, and everyone has a purpose for sure. Maybe you're not sure about it or you haven't found it, but as if you create something, I hope that it has purpose. Yeah.
Should we feel guilty that if our purpose is not saving the world, should we feel guilty if our purpose is not saving the world?
No, not at all, man. Not at all. Not at all. I think it's not it's not something that, in the end we all have our own things going on. We have our own lives. We have our own priorities and challenges. And um, if you're able to have the capacity in your life to think about this conversation that we're having and to think about how can I contribute, that's enormous already. And then if you have that privilege, because that's what it is, right? You have a safe place, you have food, you have everything, then you're actually in the position to contribute something positive in whatever form that is. That's great. You don't need to feel obligated because maybe you just can't. Maybe you're not in that position that you can contribute.
Is where we are as individuals on Maslow's hierarchy, right? We've got everything, certainly in the West and the capitalist societies that we've been talking about, and developed nations. We have all of the kind of survival stuffs. Sort of obviously, there are many people still suffering and still in bad situations.
Yeah, but to quickly add on that, because what I think it is important to kind of think about is that we need change and innovation in every aspects of our lives, right? All the issues that we spoke about before, it trickles down into the hierarchy of everything. So if you have a desk job and you don't know how you can contribute, you can think about, well, what kind of changes can I make in my job that I can suggest to my manager? Or what kind of changes can I make into the way that I get to my job? All these little things you can start thinking about and you can see what can I implement that makes a difference. Because as we said, activism looks different for everyone.
Yeah.
If you even discuss some of these topics with your colleagues, that's a form
Yeah.
of activism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's important. And that's one reason one of many reasons why you're on the show is just to talk about it, right? I think is if we're in a position where we're having discourse around these topics without it being politicized, objectified, or any type of kind of bias to anyone's opinion or a political situation, then that's what's important, to be able to have these conversations. Because at the end of the day, that's the real driver of change
Yeah.
is when we're able to talk about these things without someone getting offended or without saying the wrong thing or without it being politicized or without feeling attacked by the other side, which is all of which we experience on a certainly on the digisphere that we see in social media and everything. But I think that's the most important thing. That's all we have, right? All we have at the end of the day is the ability to communicate with each other about these topics. And if we don't do it, what do you think is going to happen, right? It's just going to end in chaos. And we're going along that road quite fast at the moment. But which brings me to kind of a story or something that is so resonant with you now that you might look back on all the projects and all the awards that you've won and the incredible work that I'm sure you push aside because the most important project is the next one and you want to be better and bigger and drive more change. What is probably the one story that means so much to you or has meant the most to you?
Ooh, well, I guess there's different ways of looking at um, when something means a lot to me. I think in terms of the emotional weight of it and what I've learned is the last project that we did, Earth Defender. I have never learned so much, I think, before on a project as with that film, because it exposed us to the ways of indigenous uh, peoples. We learned about indigenous values, and there's an incredible kind of way forward and solution there, or at least it gives a lot of positivity when you start learning about indigenous values and that there's people on this planet alive today who are living the kind of life that shows us how we can live on this planet positively, sustainably, looking at the things we talked about, seeing nature as one. They have these values intrinsically in their nature, and I think that gives like so much hope. um, we were at COP29 in Azerbaijan, the United Nations Climate Conference, and listening to the indigenous leaders there when they speak, they should be our world leaders. And I think knowing that these people are here and they are kind of becoming more present on the global stage, they're given more room to speak, and they're giving more rights as well. That gives me hope. Um, we need to like listen to indigenous values and peoples, and we need to protect their rights. They need to be given a platform everywhere in every conversation when we talk about the future.
What was the project called Wasteminster about? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the other side of kind of projects that are very memorable and that made a lot of impact, Wasteminster, I think, is one of the best examples that we have in our portfolio because it went viral and it eventually actually influenced the law. So that's, again, very tangible, something that you never expect that your work can do, and it shows the power of a piece of film. And in that film, it was a collaboration with Greenpeace, and we visualize the amount of plastic waste that is every day being shipped to developing countries while the government is saying that they're recycling it. So 1.8 million kilograms of plastic waste is being put on ships and sent to Philippines, Malaysia, Turkey, and dumped on dumps there, while you at home think you did the right thing because I put my plastic in the recycling bin. So it's being recycled. In reality, I think it's 9%, 7 or 9% of all plastic waste is actually recycled. The recycling industry is a massive,
Smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors. Yeah. It's really complicated to properly recycle something. So that's another thing. But it's being used by the fossil fuel industry, by the plastic industry to say we can keep doing what we're doing because we're recycling. But that's not really the true story. And so we kind of thought, how can we visualize this piece of data? How can we tell this story in a way you've never seen before? So we unleashed a CG simulation, a 3D animation of 1.8 kilograms of plastic pollution, and dumped it onto Boris Johnson in front of Downing Street, where he's giving a speech about how great the UK is in environmentalism. So that film, it once it got released, it picked up millions of views like within a couple days, and it went all over, and people shared it, and it really gave a reaction. Like people were upset, that when they learned about this, they were like, "How is this true? Like, how can this be true?" And Greenpeace followed it up with a campaign with the research that they did. So they showed, look, these are all the data, this is all the facts, and that whole campaign eventually pushed legislation to change the plastic exports. Turkey was the main importer of plastic waste from the UK, and they completely banned any import. So it gave the UK government like a massive problem. Like,
so what are these countries doing with it? Are they recycling? Are they using it for materials, or are they dumping it in landfill?
Yeah, most of them are dumping it in landfill because they themselves don't have the capacity to recycle that. If we in the West, in the UK, cannot recycle this waste, then why would the Philippines be able to do so, or Malaysia? It just ends up in landfills where either it's burned, or before it's burned, people are going through it to find things they can sell. They can plastic waste they can try to sell to little recycling shops here and there, but most of it is landfilled or burned. Yeah.
Fuck's sake.
Yeah. Yeah. It was also and this is happening, still everywhere. Every rich country is exporting their waste to developing countries.
It is that psychological experiment. It is governments and large institutions that control all of this, the ins and the outs of all of this, and the money. It's the flow of money essentially, and power, that make us feel like, oh, we're doing something.
Yeah.
I put my recycling in my little red bin at home and then never see it, but I feel okay. I feel cozy because I've done my part. And they don't want to kind of pull the curtain up and just show you that, this is not really true. We're just making money off it. It's yeah. Well, let's try and propel this into a more hopeful
Let's go
scenario. What can we do? What can we do as general population, as creators, as people who want to tell stories? I mean, I'm very interested in why you created a company that's based on filmmaking and visual effects to tell stories rather than go into journalism, for example. But journalists have a role to play in this as well. People who want to drive awareness, at least, if not change.
Yeah.
But what about the lowly people like me and the other people that just kind of doing their jobs day in, day out? What can we do to help?
Yeah. I mean, we spoke about this a little bit, I guess, about, activism looks like many different things. So you can do your own reflection and see, how can I change my life? Can I change my diet, for example, right? Like that is a massive thing if you do that. And you can influence the people around you very easily with that.
But people don't know how. People, it's easy for us to say. I mean, even let's take nutrition. It's such a confusing because everyone's got their own opinion. And one scientist says that, you look at any of the big podcasts out there, they'll have one scientist one week talking about this type of nutrition is best for you. And then another scientist the next week, perfectly eligible scientists with years and years of doctorate experience, saying completely the opposite. And now we, as the general public, are expected to kind of pick one and go with it. I mean, the argument over vegetarianism and veganism is palpable. There was a massive uproar because this guy had created a documentary on Netflix about how veganism is essentially better for you and better for the planet, right? That was basically his overarching narrative. Yeah. He got ripped apart.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because like telling people to change their diet is directly telling them to change their culture and who they are. Because our food is very interconnected with who we are as people and the country I'm from, right? We have cuisines from every specific country. I'm from the US, I want to eat my meat. It's a very you identify with it. So that's why also that's such a challenging subject.
But surrounding this one specifically, there is a weird rhetoric about, not even rhetoric. They don't even come out and really say it, but I mean, some of them do. But if you don't eat meat, you're considered uncool. Oh, you're so soft. You're a snowflake. Why don't you eat meat? Especially in America. Like there's this machoism surrounding eating meat, which is just, again, it's cultural, but it's incredibly misguided and misdirected. And I personally, I don't know how we kind of get through to these people, because like you said, it's years and years of genetics, cultural kind of practices that haven't changed over all these times, even though now we have the opportunity to not do those things. But you get there's even laws in some places for things like this, and it's just beggars belief. And I don't really, I mean, I guess that triggered me a little bit when you said, well, we need to change the diet. I totally agree with you, but people don't. I'd fucking, why not? Do you not want to be healthier? They don't believe the data, and that's a huge issue we have right now. Is they don't believe, whether it's climate change, COVID, or nutrition, they don't trust what they're seeing, because we're in a world of TikTok, Instagram, X, Netflix, legacy media, all spinning their own narrative depending on who's paying for it. And us as just normal people go, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What am I meant to listen to?
Yeah. It's a confusing world.
Very.
I think that's really we live in, like, very confusing times, because you're just bombarded with stuff. One of the ways to kind of get around that I'm quite bad at, but I'm trying to, is to shut off a lot of that stuff and to just kind of reconnect, with what makes me feel good, and where does my real, when I look inside, like, where do I feel happy and good? And a lot of times that's, for me, that's a specific way. For everyone, that's different. But it's a way to kind of shut off all of that for a little bit. Like, just don't absorb so much of all that information, and just kind of think about, okay, if I change my diet, take it one step at a time. Like, progress, not perfection, I think is a really good way of looking at it, because a little change is better than no change at all. So even if you can make a small change as an individual in your personal routine that becomes part of, what you do, that's already a really great step forward. And then try another one and another one. And I think that way of thinking is different than, like, I'm going to cut out everything and because that's hard. It's doable, but it's hard.
People feel defensive, and also it's a huge challenge that they probably won't be able to keep, right? And the old adage of take nutrition and vegetarianism, if you give up meat just one day a week, if everyone did that, we'd basically solve global starvation.
Yeah. The other thing is, like, we're killing so many animals that if we would kill the human race at the same rate, we would be extinct in a week.
Yeah. There'd also be complete uproar.
Yeah. But a week, that's how many animals we kill. And I think that's only land-based animals. When you look at fish, it's something like billions a week, and it come to a level where we have normalized, like, mass murder.
Yeah.
That's, as a society, we think it's okay to do this, right? Because these animals are there to feed us. When you think about that, combined with, like, 50% of all the agricultural land that we use is for animals, right? 20% of all the land on the planet is just for our animals. Yeah.
Just so we can eat them.
Just so we can eat animals, right? Imagine all that land, like, being wild nature, right? So I think, again, understanding the reality that, like, the Amazon rainforest is being destroyed to plant soy that feeds the animals we eat.
Yeah.
It's not even the soy that we eat.
Yeah.
So, like, when you think about these realities, do you want to be part of a system that is that insane? Because that's really what it is, right? Do you want to participate in that? I think, again, it comes from that feeling of, like, asking yourself that question.
That was meant to be the positive part of our conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap this up with a hopeful message, with what the future looks like on a positive spin. We all know what we actually all know, and that just to actually finish that part off, I think deep down, many of us in developed environments really know what we can do. We just choose not to, or we push it aside, or we're happy in our ignorance or our naivety. I think deep down we all know.
Yeah.
And I'm the first one to, I feel like I do some, I could do more. I know what I need to do, but I just don't, because I'm selfish in many, and that is human nature, but we, again, it's all those little bits. So I think ignorance is a cop out. I think it's like, well, I don't know what to do and I don't know where to turn for information. Yeah, you do. Yeah, I think you do. I think most people with just a very basic form of education, if you can spend 3 hours doom scrolling on fucking TikTok, you can spend 3 hours like actually figuring out what you're going to change in your life, even if it's just a 1%er.
100%. Yeah. And I'm the same, I doom scroll. I'm not perfect. I don't do everything that I know I could be doing, right? And that's, again, it's up to you individually to see how much can you change. And I walk around with the exact same feelings that you just described. Yeah.
And I think actually you're right. It does start, and we've implemented this. I say we, myself and my wife, implemented this a little bit more strictly recently. I've never been a scroller on social media. Obviously, I'm present on Instagram. I rarely doom scroll unless I see a cute, funny dog video, right? And then I'll try and find another one, and then I'll try and find another one.
Those,
yeah, you got to see those. Puts a smile on my face. And then, but I catch myself. So it all comes down to awareness. Going, oh fuck, actually, what am I doing? Can I be doing something a little bit better? Even if it's just reading a book and switching off from that environment that is not reality, right? We just think that we identify ourselves with these platforms. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think there's so much responsibility. I'm not going to go into social media and the politics of it, because it's such a fucking maze of hatred and politics and power. But, it's not, we seem to forget it's not real life. It's not reality, and it just harms us most of the time. And we all know this, again, deep down, we all know it's not a healthy thing to do. There's enough data now, after more than a decade of social media being in our lives, there's enough data to basically tell us to put that fucking phone down, right? It is damaging in more ways than we even discuss. So I think a lot of it does start there. But hey, look, what are we going to see in the next 5-10 years? How can we look at this in a positive way? Where's the hope? Where do we find the hope?
I think what I discussed, what I touched on a little bit earlier about, and that's, I guess, my personal journey, just like learning about indigenous values has given me a lot of hope. Understanding that there is a way of leadership and looking at life that is positive for the planet, and that can give us answers against this capitalism, really, that's just destroying us, right? Like, indigenous values are so the opposite of that. That is a good example for us to kind of get ideas from. And if we put indigenous leaders in leadership positions, they can get those values to the rest of us, and they can create systems that respect those values. I think that hope that I've learned about that, and that is a possibility, gives me hope. And of course also the fact that you and I having this conversation now, when maybe 5 years ago you wouldn't want to talk about this, or media in general. Like the fact that there's a massive uprising in young people who are saying, that's my future.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Yeah.
Well, it's been, we've talked a lot about, I guess, the negative side of things, but I still feel, being a little bit more educated by you and bringing this into the world of discourse, whether it's podcasting, articles, TV, whatever it might be, there's a lot of hope, and more important, there's a lot of inspiration from you and what you do. So keep it going, man. You're fighting the good fight. I want to support you in any way we can, and we'll get this episode out as soon as we can. And thank you so much for taking time to join us. I know it's been difficult, but I loved every minute. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, man. What's your frame like?
It's good. Do you want to see?
Sure.
Yeah, you can have a look. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh God, we're going to get critique. Yeah, thanks for joining, guys. This is our first Instagram live, so if you want us to keep doing these every episode, we'll be more than happy to. You watch us set up. Any thoughts on the guest, and we'll try and do something after the episode as well. So see you in maybe a couple of hours. Thanks for joining. Let's do a quick audio check. Fuji. Okay, testing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Loudly, softly. 1, 2, 3. Can you just say testing?
Yeah, testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Loud, loud. Softly, softly. Thanks for the therapy session.
Wrap. Oh man, that's the best episode we've done for a long time. Thank you so much.
Actually, one of the positive things is that it's becoming economically viable.
What is?
To be green. And this is a very big topic, so I didn't really mention it, but it's like,
oh, we need to talk about that.